The shelter warned him those puppies trusted nobody, but nobody expected them to choose the man already trying to disappear. Rain moved softly against the cracked windshield of Logan Mercer's pickup truck as he sat parked beside the old animal shelter near the edge of Ashwood, Oregon. Gray skies pressed low over the forgotten mill town, while cold wind carried the smell of wet pine and old wood smoke through the valley. November had arrived early that year, bringing the kind of cold that settled quietly into old injuries and stayed there. Logan turned off the engine and sat for another minute without moving. Some mornings felt heavier than others. Today felt like carrying wet concrete through his chest. The old trailer where he lived sat nearly 12 miles outside town beside an abandoned logging road. Quiet, forgotten, cheap enough to survive on disability checks and whatever work he still managed when his health allowed it. Most people stopped calling a long time ago. That happened after enough missed holidays and canceled invitations. People learned silence faster than loneliness learned mercy. Logan adjusted the collar of his worn flannel jacket and stepped out slowly, boots crunching softly against gravel slick with rain. 58 years old now. Former Navy SEAL. White male with silver beginning to take over dark hair, he never bothered cutting properly anymore. A body once trained to survive oceans and combat zones now protested simple things like stairs and cold weather. Funny how life changed people in ways they never trained for. The shelter building looked tired. Faded blue paint peeled along wooden siding, while a crooked sign near the entrance barely held together against rusted chains. Volunteers came and went when they could. Donations slowed every winter. Still, Logan showed up twice a week. Not because he loved people. Not because he needed purpose. Mostly because the shelter quietly exchanged volunteer hours for canned food and discounted dog supplies if someone needed help. Pride became expensive when survival entered the conversation. Inside smelled faintly of disinfectant, wet fur, and old blankets. Warm air wrapped around him, while distant barking echoed softly down narrow hallways. "Morning, Logan," called shelter manager Rebecca Hale from behind the front desk. Mid-60s. Kind eyes. Tired smile. The sort of person who carried everyone else's sadness without talking about her own. Logan nodded once. "Morning." Rebecca glanced toward the hallway and sighed quietly. "Actually," she said carefully, "I could use your help with something." Logan already knew that tone. "Trouble?" "Depends," he muttered. "How much trouble?" Rebecca gave a tired laugh. "The furry kind." She motioned toward the back kennels. 2 shepherd puppies came in last week. About 6 months old. Brothers, maybe. Nobody knows. Someone dropped them near the highway. Logan frowned slightly. "That happens." "Not like this," Rebecca said softly. "They trust nobody." As they walked through narrow shelter hallways, barking grew louder. Dogs pressed noses through chain-link kennel doors. Some wagged hopefully. Others washed with tired resignation. Logan understood that feeling more than he liked admitting. Rebecca stopped near the final kennel. "These two," she said quietly. Logan expected chaos. Growling maybe. Fear. Instead, 2 black and tan German shepherd puppies sat perfectly still near the back corner. One slightly larger than the other. Both watching silently. Intelligent amber eyes. Too calm somehow. Too observant. Shelter notes taped near the gate read, "Behavior concerns. Separation distress. Not adopting well. Nobody can handle them." Logan asked. Rebecca folded her arms. "People tried. They panic. Refuse food. Cry all night. One family returned them after 2 days." Logan shrugged slightly. "Maybe they do not like people." Rebecca sighed. "That is the weird part." She looked at him carefully. "Watch this." She unlatched the kennel slowly. Both puppies immediately stood. Logan prepared for barking or retreat. Instead, something stranger happened. Both dogs walked directly toward him. Slowly, calmly. One sat beside his left boot. The other leaned softly against his leg like they had known him for years. Logan froze completely. "What the hell?" he muttered under his breath. Rebecca blinked twice. "Okay," she whispered. "That has literally never happened." Logan crouched carefully despite the ache in his knees. One puppy studied his face quietly while the other rested nearby without fear. No nervous pacing. No barking. Just strange calm recognition. Like they had been waiting. The smaller puppy nudged lightly against his hand. Logan hesitated before scratching behind one ear. Warm fur. Soft breathing. Steady trust. Something unfamiliar settled quietly in the empty place loneliness had occupied for too long. Dangerous feeling. Temporary things usually hurt most. Guess they picked somebody, Rebecca said softly. Logan stood again slowly. Wrong guy, he answered. I barely take care of myself. Still, when he stepped back toward the hallway, both puppies stood immediately. Watching. Waiting. Logan moved farther toward the exit. Then came the sound. Not barking. Not fear. Something worse. Quiet panic. Both puppies pressed desperately against the kennel gate the second distance appeared between them. One whimpered softly while the other refused to look anywhere except at him. Rebecca frowned deeply. That is new. Logan stared back in silence. Rain tapped softly against shelter windows while cold November light faded across the room. Then the larger puppy did something strange. He sat quietly beside the kennel door, eyes fixed completely on Logan, as though somehow already certain he would come back. Rain followed Logan Mercer all the way home. Thin gray sheets moved across the Oregon hills, while wet pine trees blurred softly beyond the windshield of his old pickup truck. The farther he drove from town, the quieter everything became. Empty roads, forgotten logging trails, rusted mailboxes leaning beside gravel driveways nobody used much anymore. The kind of places people ended up when they stopped expecting visitors. Logan kept replaying the shelter in his mind. The way those puppies looked at him. Calm. Certain somehow. Like they recognized something he had forgotten existed. Trust. Strange word. Dangerous word. He pulled into the muddy clearing outside his trailer just before sunset. The place looked exactly the way loneliness felt. Rusted siding. One broken porch step. An old folding chair near the entrance where nobody had sat except him for years. Wind pushed lightly against nearby pine branches while cold November rain tapped softly across metal roofing overhead. Logan sat in the truck another minute before stepping out. His joints ached worse when storms rolled through. Shoulder pain, lower back, old injuries that never really healed, only quieted enough to ignore when necessary. Inside, the trailer felt colder than usual. He turned on the small electric heater near the kitchen and opened a can of soup without much appetite. Same routine, same silence. The second chair near the kitchen table still sat empty beneath a thin layer of dust. Funny thing about loneliness. At first it felt temporary. Then one day you realize silence had unpacked its bags and quietly moved in. Logan ate half the soup before giving up. Sleep arrived early most nights now. Mostly because exhaustion felt easier than thinking. Yet sometime near midnight, he woke unexpectedly. Rain still moved softly outside. Wind pressed gently against trailer walls. For a second, he could not figure out what pulled him from sleep. Then he remembered. The puppies. Their eyes. That strange panic when he walked away. Not my problem, he muttered quietly into the dark. But sleep refused to return. Morning arrived gray and cold. By noon, Logan found himself driving back toward town without fully deciding why. He told himself he needed groceries. Maybe coffee. Maybe shelter volunteer hours. But deep down, something quieter moved beneath excuses. Curiosity. Rebecca looked surprised when he stepped through the front door. Well, she said carefully. Guess I owe somebody $10. Logan frowned. What? She smiled faintly. Nobody thought you would come back. He shrugged. Need volunteer hours. Rebecca studied him for a second like she knew better, but decided not to argue. Then her expression softened. They have barely eaten since you left. Logan stopped walking. What? Rebecca sighed. We tried everything. Different volunteers. Food. Toys. They just wait by the kennel. Something heavy shifted quietly inside him. Uncomfortable feeling. Responsibility, maybe. He hated responsibility, especially when it looked at him with hopeful eyes. Near the back kennel, both puppies sat exactly where he remembered leaving them. Still, watching. The second Logan appeared, everything changed. Both dogs stood instantly, tails moving for the first time all week according to Rebecca. One hurried toward the gate, while the other pressed close beside him immediately after the door opened. Calm, relieved, like somebody had finally returned home. Logan crouched slowly. You two are weird, he muttered softly. One puppy nudged his arm gently. The other sat directly beside his knee. Rebecca crossed her arms behind him. I am serious, Logan. They are not doing well without you. He stood carefully. There are better people. Maybe, Rebecca said quietly. But they picked you. Logan looked around the shelter. Barking echoed softly down hallways while volunteers moved through routines already stretched too thin. Nobody else had time for complicated dogs. Nobody wanted problems, especially expensive ones. I live in a trailer, Logan said flatly. Barely enough room for me. Rebecca nodded. Temporary foster. No, just a week. Still no. They are refusing food. Logan rubbed one tired hand across his face. I can barely take care of myself. Rebecca stayed quiet for a second. Then softer now, she said. Sometimes taking care of something else helps more than people expect. Logan almost laughed at that. People always said things like that when life was not happening to them. Still, he could not ignore what happened next. The larger puppy moved quietly beside him and sat directly near his boot, watching him, waiting. The smaller one followed seconds later, resting gently against his leg. No fear, no hesitation, just quiet certainty, like they already belonged wherever he happened to stand. Logan sighed deeply. Temporary, he muttered. Rebecca blinked. Seriously? 1 week, he said firmly. That is it. Rebecca smiled wider than he expected. I will get supplies. Before she walked away, she paused and looked back. Oh, she said carefully. You might want to know something strange. Logan frowned. What now? Yesterday, one of the volunteers dropped a metal tray near the kennel. Loud noise. She hesitated. Both puppies immediately moved into protective positions. Logan looked down slowly at the dogs near his boots. Protective. Rebecca nodded once. Like military dogs. Logan frowned harder. That made no sense. Nobody mentioned training history. Shelter paperwork said anonymous roadside drop-off. Nothing more. Yet something about the way both puppies watched doorways suddenly felt familiar. Too familiar. Just then, the larger puppy stood and walked toward the supply room door near the hallway. Paused. Looked back at Logan once. Then sat down like he expected him to follow. The drive back to Logan Mercer's trailer felt longer than usual. Rain had finally stopped, leaving behind low clouds hanging heavy across the Oregon hills, while fading daylight settled softly between rows of dark pine trees. The 2 German Shepherd puppies sat quietly in the back seat, strangely calm for animals the shelter described as impossible to manage. No barking, no nervous pacing, just watchful silence. Every so often, Logan glanced at the rearview mirror and found amber eyes already watching him. Not begging, not nervous, just aware, like they were studying him, waiting for something he had not figured out yet. Temporary, he muttered again, gripping the steering wheel tighter. 1 week. Neither puppy reacted. The larger one simply lowered his head across the seat, while the smaller one continued staring toward the windshield like he already knew where they were going. By the time Logan turned onto the narrow logging road leading toward his trailer, cold mist had begun settling low against the ground. The woods grew quieter here. Forgotten. Empty enough that nobody noticed whether a man existed or not. Sometimes Logan liked that. Sometimes he hated it more than he admitted. His trailer stood near the edge of a clearing surrounded by tall fir trees and rusted logging equipment abandoned years ago. One porch light flickered weakly near the door. Home, if a place forgotten long enough, still counted as one. Logan climbed out stiffly, knees aching from the cold. All right, he muttered while opening the back door. No destroying the place. Both puppies jumped down calmly. No chaos. No nervous running. The larger puppy paused beside Logan immediately, while the smaller one scanned the clearing carefully before following. Strange. Most shelter dogs acted overwhelmed somewhere new. These 2 moved like they were checking a perimeter. Logan stopped himself from thinking too much about that. Inside, the trailer looked exactly as he remembered leaving it. Small kitchen, old couch, stack of unopened mail near the sink. One dusty bookshelf. Silence thick enough to hear the refrigerator hum. Yet somehow the silence shifted the second the puppies entered. Not louder, just different. Less empty. The smaller puppy explored carefully before settling near the front door. Watching. Waiting. The larger one walked directly toward Logan and laid quietly near the kitchen table as if he had already chosen a permanent spot. You 2 planning on paying rent? Logan asked quietly. No answer obviously. Just calm breathing. He opened cans of dog food Rebecca packed while heating leftover soup for himself. Something strange happened during dinner. Neither puppy touched food until Logan sat down first. Then both moved toward their bowls, almost together. Quiet. Disciplined somehow. Logan frowned. That is weird, he muttered. Shelter dogs usually inhaled food like survival depended on it. These two ate carefully, glancing toward him every few seconds. Later that evening, rain returned softly against trailer windows while cold air settled deeper into the hills. Logan tried reading an old paperback near the heater, but exhaustion crept slowly into his bones. Halfway through standing, dizziness caught him unexpectedly. The room tilted hard for one uncomfortable second. Before he could steady himself, the smaller puppy suddenly stepped directly in front of him, blocking his path near the hallway. Logan frowned. Move. The dog stayed put, calm but firm. Then the larger puppy stood beside him immediately. Watching carefully, Logan reached one hand against the wall until balance returned. Strange timing. Almost like they noticed before he did. I am fine, he muttered quietly, though nobody sounded less convincing than people saying those words alone. That night's sleep arrived unevenly. Old memories moved through dreams the way storms moved through mountains. Sudden, heavy, faces he had not seen in years. Voices half remembered. Empty rooms after deployment. The kind of dreams veterans stopped explaining because nobody outside military life understood what silence sometimes carried. Sometime before sunrise, Logan woke suddenly, breathing harder than usual. Dark trailer. Quiet heater hum. Cold rain outside. For a second, he forgot where he was. Then something warm brushed lightly against his hand. The larger puppy rested beside the bed, watching him. Calm. Nearby, the smaller one sat near the bedroom doorway, facing outward like some quiet guard nobody asked for. Logan stared silently for several seconds. You two always this strange, he whispered. Morning came gray again. Fog wrapped tightly around the clearing, while wet branches swayed softly outside. Logan stepped onto the porch holding black coffee, hoping for 5 minutes of peace before the day started. Both puppies followed. Suddenly, the smaller puppy froze near the edge of the yard, nose low, watching something near an old patch of dirt behind rusted wood piles. Then, without warning, he started digging. Fast, focused, dirt scattering across wet grass. Logan sighed tiredly. Oh no, we are not starting that. But the puppy refused to stop. Even stranger, the larger one joined him seconds later, both digging the exact same spot with strange urgency. Logan walked closer, annoyed more than curious at first. Then metal scraped softly beneath loose dirt. He stopped completely, bent lower. Something old sat buried beneath wet earth. Small, rusted, military green. A pouch. Logan stared without speaking while cold morning air moved quietly through the trees. Then for the first time since bringing the puppies home, something inside him shifted from confusion toward something else entirely. Recognition. Cold air lingered around Logan Mercer long after he carried the rusted military pouch inside. Morning fog still drifted quietly through pine trees outside the trailer, while both German Shepherd puppies followed close behind him, strangely calm now, as though they had finished something important. Dirt still clung to their paws. Wet leaves rested against the floor near the doorway. Logan placed the old pouch carefully on the kitchen table without speaking. For a long moment, he only stared at it. Military green canvas, faded from years underground. Rust along the zipper. Water damage near the edges. Old enough to belong to another life. The kind people locked away because memory sometimes hurt worse than time. This is impossible, Logan muttered quietly. Nobody came near his trailer. Nobody knew enough about him to bury military gear behind the place. Not anymore. Most people barely remembered he existed. One of the puppies rested near his boots while the other settled beside the front door, watching the room with strange patience. Logan grabbed black coffee and sat slowly at the table. His shoulder ached worse than usual. Cold weather always found old injuries like unfinished business. Outside, rain threatened again. Inside, silence pressed gently against old memories. Finally, he reached for the pouch. The zipper stuck halfway before giving slowly beneath careful hands. Inside sat several items wrapped tightly against weather damage. First came faded military training tags. Old, worn smooth at the edges. Logan turned one over carefully. Numbers scratched faintly beneath dirt. He frowned. Government issue. Real. Beside them sat folded papers sealed inside cloudy plastic. Training notes. Partial evaluations. References to rehabilitation work involving military dogs. Not official military language. Private contracting maybe. Strange. Then Logan stopped completely. A photograph slid loose across the table. Old, bent at one corner. Several men stood together wearing faded tactical gear outside what looked like a temporary deployment camp. Younger faces, hard eyes, tired smiles. Logan knew them immediately. Himself. Younger, stronger, before illness, before isolation, before life narrowed into silence. But it was the man standing beside him that stole the breath from his chest. Nathan Cole. Logan leaned back slowly. No, he whispered. Nathan. Same quiet grin. Same tired eyes that always looked older than they should have. Former Navy SEAL. One of the few people Logan trusted during deployment years. Smart. Reliable. The kind of man who carried storms privately. Last Logan heard, Nathan disappeared into contract work overseas after leaving the teams. 20 years. Maybe longer. Logan had not thought about him in years. Funny thing about time. Sometimes people vanished slowly enough that memory forgot to notice. The larger puppy stood quietly beside Logan's chair now, nose brushing gently against his arm. Logan barely noticed. He kept staring at the photograph. How would your stuff end up buried behind my trailer? He muttered softly. Then something stranger caught his attention. Folded deep inside the pouch rested one final envelope sealed against water. Thick paper, yellowed edges, simple black handwriting across the front. Logan Mercer. Personal. His stomach tightened unexpectedly. Nobody wrote letters anymore, especially not people long gone from military life. He turned the envelope carefully but hesitated opening it. Strange feeling, like standing near an old door nobody warned you not to open. Before he could think longer, headlights appeared suddenly outside the trailer window. Logan frowned immediately. Nobody visited. Not here. Not this far up the logging road. Both puppies reacted before he moved. The smaller one stood near the front door instantly, alert but quiet. The larger puppy moved closer beside Logan without barking. Watching. Waiting. Again, too disciplined. Too intentional. Logan rose carefully and stepped onto the porch. Rebecca Hale climbed slowly from an old shelter van wearing a rain jacket against the cold. Sorry, she called gently. Did not mean to scare you. Logan relaxed slightly. You usually drive 12 miles through mud to check foster paperwork. Rebecca gave a tired smile. Actually, I came because I remembered something. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Yesterday after you left, I looked through old shelter records. Logan crossed his arms. About the puppies? Rebecca nodded slowly. Turns out somebody prepaid almost 3 years of veterinary care for them. Logan frowned harder. Who? Rebecca hesitated. The paperwork used a trust account. She looked carefully toward the trailer behind him. But there was a handwritten note attached. Logan felt something cold settle quietly into his chest. What note? Rebecca reached into her coat pocket and unfolded a worn piece of paper. Only one sentence. She paused before reading. If anything happens to me, make sure the dogs find Logan Mercer. Wind moved softly through the trees. Somewhere deeper in the woods, rain tapped lightly against branches. Logan stood completely still. Behind him, both puppies now sat quietly near the trailer doorway, watching him, waiting, like they already knew the answer long before he did. Rebecca looked at him carefully. Do you know somebody named Nathan Cole? Logan did not answer right away. His eyes drifted slowly toward the unopened envelope still waiting on the kitchen table behind him. Then for the first time in years, something unfamiliar pushed quietly through the emptiness he carried every day. Not fear, not grief, something closer to unfinished memory. And somehow, he already knew opening that letter was going to change everything. Rain stayed through most of the afternoon after Rebecca Hale left the trailer. Gray skies pressed low against the Oregon hills while cold wind moved quietly through pine branches surrounding Logan Mercer's property. Inside, the world felt smaller somehow. Quieter, like the air itself waited for something. The unopened envelope still rested near the center of the kitchen table beside the faded photograph and rusted military pouch. Logan had made coffee twice without drinking it. Walked from one side of the trailer to the other for no reason. Sat down. Stood again. Funny thing about memory. Sometimes it arrived all at once. Other times it waited behind doors people stopped opening years ago. The 2 German Shepherd puppies stayed unusually calm all afternoon. No nervous pacing. No whining. Just quiet patience. The larger one rested beside Logan's chair, while the smaller puppy lay near the heater watching the room with strange focus. Every so often, one of them glanced toward the envelope. waiting, like they somehow understood what sat inside mattered more than anyone had said out loud. By evening, fading light settled softly through the trailer windows. Logan finally lowered himself into the kitchen chair and picked up the letter. His hands felt older than he remembered. Rough, scarred. The kind of hands built for hard things that somehow never learned what to do with grief. The envelope opened easier than expected. Inside rested several folded pages written in familiar handwriting. Messy, slightly slanted. Nathan Cole. Logan recognized it immediately. Before reading, he stared quietly at the ceiling for several seconds. "You better have a good explanation for this," he muttered softly. Then he unfolded the first page. "Logan, if this letter reached you, then things probably went the way I hoped they would not. First thing you should know is this. I tried finding you for years. But you always had a habit of disappearing when life got heavy." Logan stopped reading. That sounded exactly like Nathan. Honest without trying too hard. He continued slowly. "I know you probably think I forgot what happened after deployment. Truth is, I never forgot anything. Especially not what you did for me." Logan frowned deeply. His eyes moved slower now. More careful. 20 years ago, after our second deployment, I was in worse shape than anybody knew. Could not sleep. Could not think straight. Could barely make it through most days. Everybody else thought I was handling things fine because that is what military guys do. Pretend. You probably do not remember this, but one night after training you stayed awake with me until sunrise because you knew something was wrong. You sat there drinking terrible coffee and talking about nothing important until I stopped feeling like disappearing. Logan lowered the paper slowly. Wind pushed softly against trailer walls outside. Somewhere deeper in memory, something shifted. Small pieces returning. Nathan sitting alone near camp housing. Sleepless nights. Silence nobody talked about. Logan remembered sitting nearby. Just staying because leaving felt wrong somehow. Back then it seemed small. One tired conversation between friends. He kept reading. "You saved my life, Logan. I never told you because men like us were not good at saying things that mattered. But I never forgot it. Years later, when I started working with rehabilitation dogs for struggling veterans, I kept thinking about something. Nobody ever checked on the people who saved everybody else." Logan's chest tightened quietly. Outside, rain softened against the roof. Beside him, the larger puppy rested his head lightly against Logan's knee without warning. Warm. Steady. Logan barely moved. Then came the sentence that changed everything. These puppies were never random. They were trained through a recovery program I helped build. Smart enough to notice things humans miss. Loyal enough to stay when people leave. If my health ever failed, I asked someone to make sure they found you. Because I knew you would never ask for help yourself. Logan stopped breathing for a second. The room suddenly felt too quiet. Too small. He read the next line slower now. "You spent your whole life rescuing people. Figured somebody should return the favor. If they are with you now, that means they chose you too. Trust them. And maybe, for once, stop trying to carry everything alone." Logan sat back heavily in the chair. For several moments, nothing moved except quiet rain and heater noise. 20 years. Nathan remembered 20 years. A moment Logan barely held on to had somehow mattered enough for somebody else to build an entire plan around it. Funny thing about kindness. People forgot the moments they survived. Sometimes other people remembered them forever. Logan rubbed tired hands across his face. "You idiot," he whispered quietly toward nobody. "Could have just called." The smaller puppy stood and walked closer now, settling near Logan's boots while the larger one stayed pressed quietly against his knee. Safe. Familiar. Like they had finally arrived exactly where they belonged. Then something unexpected happened. Logan's breathing caught sharply. Dizzy again. Stronger this time. His hand grabbed the edge of the table as the room tilted slightly sideways. He closed his eyes for a second. "Not now," he muttered quietly. But both puppies reacted immediately. The larger one stood alert, while the smaller puppy blocked the narrow hallway like before, watching him carefully. Calm. Focused. Too practiced. Logan frowned weakly through exhaustion. "What exactly were you two trained for?" he whispered softly. Outside, darkness settled deeper through the trees while somewhere inside the trailer, something long buried had quietly begun waking up again. Darkness settled fully outside Logan Mercer's trailer while cold November rain continued tapping softly against the metal roof. Pine trees swayed gently in the wind beyond fogged windows, and somewhere deep in the hills the sound of distant thunder rolled low enough to feel more like memory than weather. Inside, warm air from the small heater pushed weakly through the cramped trailer, but the room still felt colder somehow. Not from temperature, from realization. Nathan Cole had remembered him. After all these years, Nathan remembered one sleepless night Logan barely recalled and somehow built an entire plan around it. The thought sat heavily in his chest. People usually forgot kindness. Life moved too fast. Pain made memory selfish. Yet Nathan had carried that moment through deployments, years, illness, and somehow all the way to the two strange puppies now watching him like silent guardians. Logan sat quietly at the kitchen table while Nathan's letter rested open beneath tired hands. Coffee sat untouched beside him, already cold. The larger German shepherd remained pressed gently against his leg, while the smaller puppy watched the hallway without moving, alert but calm. Too calm, too observant. Almost like they expected something Logan still had not caught on to. Another wave of dizziness arrived harder than before. Logan shut his eyes briefly and gripped the edge of the table until the room steadied. His breathing felt uneven now, tighter somehow. He hated this feeling. The weakness. The reminders that bodies eventually stopped listening no matter how disciplined a person once was. "I am fine," he muttered quietly, though the empty trailer made the words sound less believable. The larger puppy lifted his head immediately. Watching him. Waiting. Logan stood slowly, meaning only to walk toward the sink for water. But halfway there, weakness struck again. Sharper. Sudden enough that his shoulder bumped hard against the counter. The smaller puppy moved instantly, stepping directly between Logan and the hallway like before. Blocking movement. Calm but firm. The larger one stood close against his side, steady enough that Logan almost reached down for balance without realizing it. "Seriously?" Logan muttered weakly. "You two got opinions now." But something about the way they watched him made joking harder than usual. They were paying attention. Not emotionally. Practically. Like trained professionals reading warning signs nobody else noticed. Logan managed water and sat carefully on the couch. Outside, rain grew heavier. Wind pushed softly against trailer walls while cold settled deeper into the mountains. For several minutes, everything quieted. The puppies stayed close. One near the couch, one near the front door, watching, waiting. Then Logan noticed something strange. The larger puppy kept glancing toward the kitchen table, specifically toward the letter. Finally, Logan sighed and picked it back up. More pages waited folded underneath. He almost missed them. Hands slower now, he unfolded the next section. "Logan, if you are reading this, then the dogs probably already figured out things before you did. They always do. Listen to them when something feels wrong. I trained them for veterans dealing with isolation, panic, and medical episodes. Smart enough to interrupt bad moments. Stubborn enough not to give up." Logan frowned. Medical episodes. His eyes moved lower. "I know you hate asking for help. Always did. But disappearing quietly is still disappearing. You once sat with me through the worst night of my life because you said something I never forgot. You said, 'Nobody gets left alone if I can help it.' Funny thing is, Logan, somewhere along the way you forgot those words applied to yourself too." Logan stared at the page for a long time. Rain softened again outside. Somewhere inside memory, Nathan's face returned clearer now. Younger. Tired. Sitting alone after deployment with eyes carrying storms nobody talked about. Logan remembered cheap coffee. Bad jokes. Long silence. Staying because leaving felt dangerous somehow. Back then it seemed small. Nothing heroic. Just friendship. Funny how the moments people survived rarely looked important at the time. The larger puppy rested his head gently against Logan's hand. Warm fur. Steady breathing. Familiar comfort. Logan exhaled slowly. "He really sent you," he whispered quietly. The puppy blinked once like he already knew. Then suddenly the room tilted harder than before. Fast enough that Logan barely reached the couch arm before sitting heavily again. Breathing sharper now. Vision slightly blurred. "Damn it," he muttered softly. The puppies reacted immediately. The smaller one moved to the door and began pacing once, then stopped. Watching Logan carefully. Waiting. The larger puppy nudged Logan's hand repeatedly until he reached automatically for his phone on the table. Strange. Intentional. Too intentional. Logan frowned weakly. "What are you trying to tell me?" But the smaller puppy had already moved again, standing near the front window, ears raised sharply toward something outside. Headlights suddenly appeared through rain and darkness. Slow. Careful. A vehicle climbing the muddy road toward the trailer. Logan sat frozen for one confused second. Nobody came here. Nobody. Yet somehow, before the truck even stopped outside, both puppies relaxed completely. Like whoever just arrived was expected. Headlights cut softly through the rain while Logan Mercer remained frozen on the couch, one hand pressed against the armrest as dizziness still lingered behind his eyes. Outside, muddy gravel shifted beneath tires before an old pickup truck came to a stop near the porch. The two German Shepherd puppies, tense only moments ago, relaxed instantly. The larger puppy moved toward the front door calmly, while the smaller one sat near Logan, watching him carefully as though making sure he stayed upright. Logan frowned weakly. "You two know who that is?" he muttered. Before he could think much further, a knock came against the trailer door. Firm but familiar somehow. Logan pushed himself upright slower this time. Every muscle felt heavier than usual. He hated being seen weak. Especially now. Especially after spending years making sure nobody looked too closely. When he opened the door, Rebecca Hale stood beneath the porch light, holding an umbrella beside an older man wearing a weathered brown jacket and a gray veteran cap pulled low against the rain. "Sorry to show up uninvited," Rebecca said gently, "but somebody made me nervous." She glanced toward the puppies. The older man stepped forward with a warm but careful expression. "Name is Walter Jennings," he said. "Marine Corps. Rebecca called me after hearing your name." Logan frowned. "My name?" Walter nodded slowly. "Nathan talked about you." Logan felt the ground shift slightly beneath memory again. Nathan. Always Nathan somehow. Rebecca stepped inside first, quietly taking stock of the trailer. Old heater. Half-finished soup. Medication untouched near the sink. The kind of loneliness people only noticed when standing inside it. Walter moved carefully into the room while rain tapped softly outside. "Nathan volunteered at the Veteran Outreach Center a few years back," he explained. "Helped men who stopped asking for help." He paused, eyes drifting briefly toward the puppies. "Those dogs." A tired smile crossed his face. "He trained some of the best recovery animals I ever saw." Logan sat slowly again, exhaustion harder to hide now. "Why are you here?" he asked quietly. Walter hesitated before answering honestly. "Because Nathan worried about you." Silence settled heavily across the trailer. Funny thing about loneliness. People carried it so long they forgot how strange concern felt. Logan looked away toward the rain-covered window. "Bit late for that." Walter nodded once. "Maybe. But late is still better than never." Before Logan could answer, another sharp wave of dizziness rolled through him. Stronger now. His breathing tightened unexpectedly. Rebecca crouched slightly beside him immediately. "Logan," she said gently, "when is the last time you actually saw a doctor?" He gave a tired look. "That bad, huh?" Nobody laughed. The room stayed too quiet. The larger puppy moved directly beside Logan, while the smaller one nudged gently against his arm, focused completely on him. Walter frowned. "Nathan said you hated hospitals." Logan managed half a weak smile. "Nathan talked too much." Rebecca glanced toward untouched medication near the kitchen counter. "Did you stop taking your prescriptions?" Logan stayed quiet long enough to answer the question anyway. Outside, rain softened slightly while cold wind moved through nearby trees. Inside, concern filled spaces silence usually occupied. Funny thing about people who spent years rescuing others. They rarely noticed when they themselves started sinking. Rebecca finally stood carefully. "We are not leaving you alone tonight," she said softly. Logan sighed. "I am fine." At that exact moment, he tried standing and nearly lost balance again. The larger puppy pressed firmly against his leg before he could stumble, while the smaller one blocked the narrow hallway immediately, watching him with focused calm. Walter exhaled quietly. "Well," he muttered, "guess the dogs already voted." For the first time and longer than Logan remembered, laughter almost slipped into the room. Small, quiet, human. Rebecca made coffee while Walter sat nearby, sharing stories Nathan once told about veteran outreach projects and men quietly finding reasons to stay alive. Slowly, details emerged. Nathan spent years helping struggling veterans reconnect through shelter dogs. Quiet healing. No speeches. No attention. Just small acts of staying beside people until loneliness loosened its grip. He always said military guys trusted dogs faster than people, Walter said softly. Logan looked toward the puppies sleeping near the heater now. Safe. Calm. Like their work had only just begun. Hours later, Rebecca finally convinced Logan to schedule a medical visit the next morning. Reluctantly, complaining quietly, but agreeing all the same. Before leaving, Walter stopped near the doorway and handed Logan something folded carefully inside an envelope. Nathan asked me to give you this if the dogs ever found you, he said. Logan frowned. More letters? Walter smiled faintly. No, he looked toward the puppies once before stepping outside into soft rain. Something better. After they left, silence returned to the trailer again. But different this time. Less empty somehow. Logan looked down slowly at the unopened envelope resting in his hands. No name written outside. Just one sentence in Nathan's familiar handwriting. Wait until you are ready to believe you still matter. Morning arrived slowly beneath pale, Oregon rain. Fog rested low between the pine trees surrounding Logan Mercer's trailer, while cold air pressed softly against the windows. For the first time in years, the silence inside the trailer felt different. Not gone, just shared. The two German Shepherd puppies still slept near the heater, stretched close enough to touch each other, breathing steady beneath soft morning light. Logan sat awake long before sunrise, Nathan's envelope resting unopened near the kitchen table beside yesterday's cold coffee. He had stared at it half the night. Wait until you are ready to believe you still matter. Funny sentence. Dangerous sentence too. Because once people stopped believing that, starting again felt harder than surviving without it. Logan rubbed tired hands across his face and looked toward the puppies. They had barely left his side since arriving. Watching him, blocking doorways during dizzy spells. Somehow understanding things he barely admitted to himself. Nathan really sent them. The thought still felt impossible. Yet there they were. Real. Loyal. Persistent in ways loneliness never expected. Outside, rain softened as morning settled deeper into the hills. Logan reluctantly kept his promise and drove into town for the medical appointment Rebecca forced him to make. Both puppies sat quietly in the back seat the entire drive, strangely calm again. No barking. No nervous movement. Just watchful silence. Ashwood looked smaller beneath gray skies. Old diners. Empty storefronts. Logging trucks parked near muddy roads. The kind of town where people noticed absence faster than presence. At the small clinic, Dr. Amelia Ross looked through Logan's records with the same expression doctors always used when patients waited too long. Concern hidden behind professionalism. You should have come in months ago, she said gently after tests and long silence. Logan shrugged weakly. Been busy avoiding people. Surprisingly, she smiled slightly. Well, the good news is this is manageable. Logan frowned. Manageable? Stress, she said carefully. Poor nutrition. Medication inconsistency. Chronic inflammation. She folded papers neatly. Your body is tired, Logan. But tired is not the same thing as broken. Funny thing about hope. Sometimes it sounded suspicious after too many hard years. Logan left carrying prescriptions he should have never stopped taking and instructions he knew Nathan would probably lecture him about if he were still alive. Outside, the puppies greeted him like he had returned from months away instead of 40 minutes. The larger puppy pressed quietly against his side, while the smaller one rested near his boots. Waiting. Present. Like nobody ever forgot to come back anymore. Later that afternoon, Logan stopped by the shelter for supplies Rebecca insisted he needed. But something felt different there too. People looked at him differently now. Not pity exactly. Respect maybe. Curiosity. One volunteer smiled awkwardly near the entrance. Heard the dogs basically adopted you, she said softly. Logan glanced down toward the puppies beside him. Looks like. Rebecca greeted him near the front desk carrying paperwork and dog food. Funny thing, she said carefully. Since those two left, adoption visits somehow increased. Logan raised an eyebrow. How? Rebecca laughed quietly. People saw your story. Word travels fast in small towns. Logan frowned. What story? Lonely veteran gets chosen by impossible shelter dogs. She shrugged gently. Turns out people like hope. Hope. Strange word again. On the way home, Logan stopped unexpectedly near the river outside town. Gray water moved slowly beneath fog, while pine trees reflected softly against the surface. Both puppies followed quietly, staying close beside him. No leash pulling. No chaos. Just companionship. Logan stood there longer than expected. Hands inside coat pockets. cold wind brushing softly through silver hair. "You know," he muttered quietly toward the dogs. Nathan always had terrible timing. The larger puppy sat beside him, watching the river. The smaller one leaned lightly against his leg. Familiar warmth. Steady presence. Somehow enough. Funny how loneliness left slowly. Not all at once. First came routine. Then company. Then one day silence stopped feeling so heavy. Back at the trailer near sunset, Logan finally reached for Nathan's unopened envelope. The puppies rested nearby, watching quietly while rain returned soft against the roof. Hands slower now, Logan unfolded the contents carefully. Inside rested property papers. Not expensive, not grand, just something simple. Several acres outside Ashwood beside a small training property Nathan once used for veteran dog rehabilitation. Folded beneath it sat one final handwritten note. "Logan, if you made it this far, then maybe you stopped disappearing long enough to hear this. The property is yours if you want it. Keep helping the dogs. Keep helping yourself. Maybe help somebody else too." Turns out lonely people recognize each other faster than most. Logan stared quietly at the page while rain moved softly outside. The larger puppy suddenly stood and walked toward the front window, ears raised slightly toward headlights, slowly approaching through the trees again. Another vehicle. Another visitor. But this time, instead of tension, both puppies wagged their tails quietly, like something important had finally arrived. Rain slowed sometime after sunset, leaving only the sound of dripping pine branches outside Logan Mercer's trailer, while cold November fog settled softly across the hills. The headlights near the clearing moved slowly closer before stopping near the porch. Both German Shepherd puppies waited calmly near the door, tails moving gently against the floor now. No tension, no alert posture, just quiet certainty. Logan frowned slightly from the kitchen table, Nathan's property papers still resting open beside him. "Guess you two know something I do not," he muttered softly. A moment later came a knock at the door. When Logan opened it, Rebecca Hale stood outside beside Walter Jennings again, both holding cardboard boxes carefully protected beneath jackets against the cold. "Hope we are not interrupting," Rebecca said with a tired smile. Walter raised an eyebrow toward the puppies. "Judging by the welcoming committee, I think we got approved." Logan stepped aside reluctantly. "You people really need hobbies." Warm air greeted them inside, while rain tapped softly against the roof. Rebecca placed one box carefully near the kitchen table. "These came from Nathan's storage unit," she explained. Lawyer finally released everything after paperwork cleared. Logan looked toward the boxes, but said nothing. Walter sat slowly near the heater, stretching old knees with the quiet discomfort only veterans recognized. "Nathan left instructions," Walter said gently. "Said if you accepted the dogs, then eventually this belonged with you too." Logan crossed his arms. "Accepted?" He glanced toward the puppies. "Pretty sure they made that decision." Rebecca smiled softly. "Looks that way." The larger puppy settled near Logan's feet, while the smaller one rested close beside Walter like he already trusted him. Strange thing about loyal animals. Somehow they recognized safe people before humans did. Inside the first box rested old photographs, training journals, worn dog leashes, and military challenge coins. Memories carefully packed away. Quiet proof somebody spent years trying to help people survive loneliness without making them feel broken for carrying it. Logan found himself sitting at the table longer than expected, slowly turning pages Nathan once touched. Photos of struggling veterans standing beside rescue dogs. Smiles returning slowly. Men sitting around campfires. Quiet healing without speeches. One photograph stopped him completely. Nathan stood beside a younger veteran outside a small training cabin. Behind them, written on a wooden sign near the entrance, Ashwood Recovery Ranch. Logan frowned. "This property Nathan left me." Walter nodded immediately. "That place." Rebecca folded her hands gently. "He wanted it to continue." Logan shook his head slowly. "I do not know the first thing about running anything." Walter gave a soft laugh. "Funny thing. Nathan said you would say exactly that." He reached into his jacket and handed Logan another folded note. Short this time. Familiar handwriting. "You do not need to save everybody. Just keep the porch light on for people trying not to disappear." Logan stared quietly at the words while something unfamiliar settled slowly into the empty places loneliness used to occupy. Purpose maybe. Small. Fragile. But real. Weeks passed quieter after that. Winter arrived slowly over Ashwood. Logan started taking medication regularly, eating better, showing up to shelter volunteer days more often than he admitted he enjoyed. The puppy stayed close through everything. Morning walks through wet pine trails, quiet evenings near the heater, bad nights when old memories returned. Somehow they always noticed before he said anything. Slowly, people started stopping by more. Veterans mostly. Men carrying invisible things they never learned how to explain. Coffee appeared. Stories followed. Nobody pushed too hard. Nobody judged silence. Sometimes they sat around Nathan's old ranch property, simply existing beside one another while the puppies wandered between booths and folding chairs like small guardians checking on forgotten souls. Logan never called it healing. Healing sounded dramatic. This felt quieter than that, like learning how not to disappear. One snowy evening, nearly 6 months later, Logan sat near the fireplace inside the small cabin at the recovery property Nathan left behind. Outside, soft snow covered pine branches while cold wind moved gently against the windows. Warm light filled the room now. Laughter echoed softly from another room where several veterans stayed after dinner. The kind of sound loneliness forgot how to imagine. The puppies slept nearby, finally peaceful in ways they never seemed at the shelter. Safe. Home. Logan picked up the old photograph of himself and Nathan one final time. Younger faces. Hard years. Quiet loyalty. Funny thing about kindness. Sometimes people forgot the moments they gave it away. But the world remembered. Sometimes through old friends. Sometimes through stubborn dogs who refused to leave. Logan looked toward the sleeping puppies and smiled faintly to himself. You boys did good, he whispered softly. Outside, snow continued falling gently across the Oregon hills while warmth gathered quietly inside the cabin. And for the first time in longer than Logan could remember, tomorrow no longer felt like something he had to survive alone. Perhaps miracles did not always arrive loudly. Sometimes they arrived cold, covered in fur, and stubborn enough to wait beside the people who forgot they still mattered.